can see a life together, standing by you, and I think I want to forever. And after all that's come and gone through all the years, I can't believe the moment's finally here. And you never looked so beautiful. You're everything I've waited for, and so much more, standing right in front of me. And we could weather every high and low. If love is going where we go to have and hope forever, let's start our life together. Let's start our life together. Let's start our life together.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking time to attend our webinar this morning. Now, this webinar is a combined session between the Center for Holistic Initiatives for Learning and Development, Child, at the Yongbulin School of Medicine and the Department of Pediatrics at NUH. I am Shang-Chi, and I'm a Senior Consultant Developmental Pediatrician and Deputy Director of Practice and Partnerships at Child. Now, Child was established in 2020 with the Lien Foundation. Much of Child's work integrates the combined strengths of our consortium partners and with all parties in the early childhood space to give children the best start to life. Now, this partnership vision is very similar to the work that Cincinnati Children's Hospital does, where they aspire to combine a world-class hospital health system with all stakeholders in the community for impact. So no wonder they are ranked the best children's hospital in the US in the 2023 to 2024 rankings. So today we are so privileged to have with us two of our Wong Hock Boon visiting professors from the Cincinnati Children's Hospital in the US. Now, we visited them with the Queenstown Health District with a team from Department of Pediatrics in March this year. And in case you are guessing, they're not in Cincinnati, they are actually now here in Singapore, and we've been learning with them for the past 2 weeks. So now first, let me introduce Professor Peter Margolis, who will be presenting. Now, Professor Peter Margolis is a professor of pediatrics and co-director emeritus of the James Anderson Center for Health Systems Excellence at Cincinnati Children's Hospital Medical Center. Professor Margolis and his research team have developed something called the Innovative Learning Health System. This engages patients, families, clinicians, scientists, and communities in working together to improve the care of patients. Now, his work involved making changes to how health systems are organized, and his work adopts the application of systems improvement methods across a broad range of areas in communities and public health settings. And after Peter gives his talk, I would like to welcome Professor Robert Kahn to participate in a question and answer session with all of us. And some of you may have heard him speak last week at our pediatrics CME. Professor Robert Kahn is a professor of pediatrics and associate chair for community health in the Department of Pediatrics at University of Cincinnati College of Medicine. He is also vice president of health equity strategies, and he leads the new Michael Fisher Child Health Equity Center. He is involved in the Community Health Strategic Plan, which aims to help ensure Cincinnati's children are the healthiest in the nation through strong family and community partnerships, especially children who suffer from poverty and racial discrimination. So without further ado, let's invite Professor Peter Margolis to present to you involving patients and building partnerships in co-production and delivery of health care. Peter, please.
Thank you, Shang-Chi. And let me just bring up my slides. It's really been a pleasure to be here for the last couple of weeks. been just so impressed by the work that we've observed taking place, the commitment to population and community health, and just the caliber of science that's and care that's taking place. So I'm excited to be able to share a little bit about the work that we're doing, and I just want to put it in context of the healthcare system in the United States, which has many, many shortcomings, as illustrated on this slide. In contrast to Singapore, the U.S. healthcare system consumes 19% of our GDP, and that is imposing a tremendous burden on the society because it limits our ability to invest in other kinds of important infrastructure like education and social services. And in addition, there are tremendous variations in the effectiveness of care. There are inefficiencies. The workforce is burned out, and we are also struggling with the time it takes to translate the rapidly growing number of new therapeutic and technological advances into routine care. We at Cincinnati Children's and at the Anderson Center and in our work, we've taken an approach to these problems that really focuses on the system. And I want to highlight three specific system problems that are underlying some of these challenges. The first one has to do with coordination, and that is the way that our healthcare system is organized results in various sectors, healthcare, payers, industry, each pursuing their own goals. The second problem is capacity. We don't have the ability to meet the thousands of needs that patients have for more personalized care. And in today's world, the demand for what I call anytime, anywhere care. And the last is a distribution of labor problem. Our assumptions about who can participate in contributing to the healthcare delivery system and how. And so that's what I'd like to talk about today. One of my mentors and one of the fathers of improvement science in healthcare is Paul Batalden. And he's very well known for this quote, which is that every system is perfectly designed to achieve exactly the results it gets. So if we're not happy about the performance of a system, then we need to redesign it in some way. And that's been our work over the last 15 or 20 years, developing a model that we call today learning health networks. And I want to just share a few of the results of what's taken place. And then I'll go a little bit more deeply into how this model of care delivery works. So learning health networks have increased remission for kids with Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis from 60 to 82% across more than 30,000 patients and close to 110 care centers. This is about 2/3 of kids in the US living with this condition. We've also used this model to improve hospital safety. There's a network called Solutions for Patient Safety, which involves today about 150 hospitals. They've decreased serious safety events by 32%, as well as many other adverse events taking place in the hospital. And in 2020, Solutions for Patient Safety saved about 19,000 kids from serious harm and $380 million. There's a network called the National Pediatric Cardiology QI Collaborative that's focused on children living with hypoplastic left heart. They've produced a 40% reduction in mortality in the first year of life. And this is for 95% of kids in the US who live with this condition. Another network called the Action Network is focused on children with congestive heart failure and the use of cardiac assist devices, which up until now have been designed and certified by the FDA only for adults, resulting in a very high stroke rate because of the way the devices were being used. This network reduced strokes by 50%, and they've been working to achieve FDA approval, improving the education and the use of these devices in childhood. Rob's work focuses on community health And we will touch on several of the examples from his network called the All Children Thrive Network, one of the most striking is an improvement in reading scores across 11,000 children in the Cincinnati public school system, increasing the percentage who were proficient in third grade reading. They've also shown a reduction in bed days among children from the 3 poorest neighborhoods in Cincinnati. There's a network called the Improving Renal Outcomes Collaborative, which is focused on children living with renal transplants or undergoing renal transplants, and they've produced a 44% reduction in acute kidney rejections across 12 nephrology centers. Up until now, this work has been supported by a significant amount of federal and foundation funding, and the networks collectively have published now well over 200 papers describing the results and the methods that we're using, and that's what I'd like to go into a little bit more in just a minute. This is a recent slide from the community health team showing a reduction in disparities between Black and white children. What you can see here, the orange line is the asthma-related admissions for Black kids, and the blue line is for non-Black kids. You can see this 5% reduction that took place over the last several years. And these improvements have been driven by enhanced social needs screening and more responsive partnerships with schools and housing, as well as community outreach and the underlying infrastructure of the network. So it's not intuitive that very large groups of people or thousands of volunteers could beat big companies, but they do. This is a quote from Yochai Benkler. He's the director of the Berkman Center for the Society and the Internet at Harvard. And many of you will not be old enough to remember Microsoft Encarta. It was an encyclopedia. Some of us are old enough to actually remember real encyclopedias that were books that we used. Well, almost all of us know about Wikipedia. And if you Google Microsoft Encarta, what you'll see is a Wikipedia entry that shows that Microsoft Encarta went out of business in 2009 because it couldn't compete with Wikipedia, an encyclopedia created by 10,000 editors, volunteer editors around the world who are producing information that literally billions of us use every day, overcoming the resources and capabilities of an enormous company like Microsoft. So this is the visual image that we like to think about when we describe learning health networks. It's the collective action of thousands of people focused on achieving important and solving important problems. Now, networks use an organizational structure that is widespread and that we're all used to participating in. It's called an actor-oriented organizational structure. And when we use Facebook, when we stay at someone's home, an Airbnb property, we are participating in organizations that are organized like a network. The U.S. military and actually militaries around the world today have organized as networks as well in order to increase their speed of responsiveness and their adaptive capability. And the seminal publication on this topic, it was written by Øystein Fjellstad. He's a professor at the Norwegian School of Business, describing the architecture for these kinds of more self-organizing adaptive organizations. When we think about the core elements of a network, they're illustrated here, and this is what I'll be talking about today. Networks are organized around a shared purpose, what we think of at Cincinnati Children's as an unrelenting focus on improving important outcomes for patients and families. They involve sharing data in near real time, transparently across the participants, so people can see what's going on and come up with solutions to respond to that. They bring in the community and patients, clinicians, researchers in co-producing care, and they rely on the capability of individuals to have skills and knowledge to actually change systems. So in 2010, a colleague of mine and I, Michael Sade, wrote a grant to the NIH with this specific aim. We wondered whether or not we could create a vastly better chronic care system by harnessing the motivation and collective intelligence of patients and clinicians, and whether if we did, the system might allow patients and physicians to share information, to collaborate, to solve problems, and use their collective creativity and expertise to act in ways that would improve health. So I want to start off with an example, and it's an example that involves Rob that I've taken his name off this slide, but since he's here and willing to allow us to share this, I thought it would be particularly useful today because we can actually talk about the example. Rob's son, Seth, has Crohn's disease. And in 2016, he wrote this email to one of our other colleagues at Cincinnati Children's, Sander Vinks, who's a very well-known pharmacokineticist. Rob was wondering, Seth was struggling with his keeping his Remicade dose in the right level. And Rob wondered whether or not Sander might have something to say about that, whether there might be scientific means to help keep adjust the dose to keep the dose in the proper range. And Rob also had other important information. This is a spreadsheet that Rob's wife, Jessica, kept starting on the day that Seth was diagnosed, with information about his condition. It has his Remicade dose, his height, his weight, his immunologic markers, as well as the Remicade level. And using these data, Sander created a precision dosing algorithm, which he subsequently published, that enabled Seth's gastroenterologist to adjust his dose based on Seth's pharmacokinetic profile to keep the range, to keep the dose in the right range. And Seth subsequently went into more sustained remission, started growing better, and living more easily with the disease. Subsequently, this model was adopted by one of the gastroenterologists at Cincinnati Children's named Phil Minar, who submitted an NIH grant. And currently there is an algorithm that runs in the Cincinnati Children's EPIC system that allows gastroenterologists to predict children's appropriate dose and help optimize them. And this method is now part of a NIH funded randomized trial. So we wondered, not everyone has, in fact, few of us have two parents who are epidemiologists at leading children's hospitals who can make the system work for you. What if we could create a system that would actually enable anybody to participate in this way? And that's what I want to talk about now. So the prototype for this work is a network that's called the Improve Care Now Network. It was formed in 2000. It was designed in 2004, and in 2007, 9 GI care centers came together to start measuring their performance in the management of kids with IBD. And what you can see on this slide is the percentage of kids in clinical remission beginning at the initiation of this network. The starting point was around 60%. Today, the percentage of kids in remission is actually up to about 83%. This slide is not updated. And the network involves 105 care centers from around the US, Canada, Europe, and the Middle East. Today, there are more than 50,000 patients in the registry, more than 1,000 physicians participating, and as I mentioned previously, 2/3 of all children living with this condition in the United States are part of the network. This model has now grown. At Cincinnati Children's, we've supported the development of about 15 networks in 700 or 800 care sites, 300 healthcare organizations in the US, Europe, the Middle East, with tens of thousands of clinicians now participating. So this is a diagram that shows the development of a learning health network. And what I want to do is zero in on the right side of the diagram. What happens in a network is that teams representing individual hospitals come together and meet at what we call community learning sessions. They learn about evidence-based changes. They learn about innovations, and then they go back to their own place and test new ways of delivering care using quality improvement, plan, do, study, act cycles in a repeated series of meetings, face-to-face meetings, and at these learning sessions, by webinar, and by virtual gatherings. There's an ongoing evaluation of outcomes. Gaps in between desired performance and current performance are identified. This leads to annual goal setting and priority setting, as well as improvement in research projects that the network does on a continuous basis to improve care. So the way this looks at on the ground is that each individual hospital will have a leadership team that might include a parent, a nurse, a doctor, local IT capabilities. The team sends data from every clinical encounter, as well as learnings that they've had, tools and techniques, to a core operations team of the network that includes QI leadership, registry, QI consultants, analysts, project management. And the core team sends back reports about outcomes and process, about data quality, care planning reports, population management reports. There's QI training, monthly webinars, learning sessions, and sharing of best practices. The local teams use the model for improvement to test and adapt these changes to their local setting. And at the central level, we use the approach that I just illustrated to manage the collaboration across all the sites. So what's driving the improvement in improved care now is not the advent of new drugs. In fact, there haven't been any new drugs, or there weren't any new drugs until about 3 or 4 years ago. All of the improvement that I showed came from optimizing care, sharing knowledge, and sharing know-how across the network. So let me go more deeply into the core components. I talked about the importance of building community, but I want to be even more specific about that. When we started the research about how to bring in the community and how to do co-production, we engaged user-centered designers to help us understand the types of people in the system. Bianca Simmons is not a real young woman. She's what designers call a persona. She's a representation of a segment of people who are living with a chronic illness, and she represents people with particular goals. People like Bianca not only want to keep their symptoms at bay, but they also want to be leaders in the community. And what we learned from our research was that there is a segment of people who that pretty much all of us want to cooperate and make a difference, and that systems can be designed to allow people like Bianca Simmons to make even more of a difference. Shown at the bottom of this slide are Sammy Kennedy and Jenny David. They are real young women who joined the Improved Care Now network when they were seniors in high school. They were about 17 years old, and they organized what they called the PAC, the Patient Advisory Council. One of the problems that they faced was that both of them are living with ostomies, and their doctors, they're middle-aged, elderly, or middle-aged white guys like me, didn't know much about what to tell a a adolescent about how to go to the swimming pool with your ostomy bag if you wanted to wear a bikini. So they organized a group of kids. They developed a toolkit called the Guide to Gutsy Living. They recruited clinicians and nurses from the network to validate the information, and they published the results on the Improve Care Now website, where today, if you go there, you can find many resource toolkits that have been created by patients and families for other patients and families. And these are very motivated young women. They also published the results of this system that they developed in Learning Health Systems Journal. It's shown here. Today, Sammy is a pediatric hospitalist at Nemours Medical Center in Florida, and Jenny is a pediatric IBD psychologist at Nationwide Children's. So this has been important not only for other kids, but they're also for their own careers. So Sammy and Jenny didn't start out this way. People, in fact, who are facing a chronic condition have to go through a process in order to get to the point that they're able to make these kinds of contributions. So the network is established to build awareness in the community. You have to become aware that there's a network that you could even join. Then you have to have an opportunity to participate, to use the tools or read a blog that's written by one of the other kids or sign a consent form, to join, to have opportunities to improve a tool or join a QI team or become a mentor for another child. And then finally, to become what we call an owner, to become like Sammy and Jenny, someone who's creating tools, leading a team, generating new ideas. What's interesting is that all networks are organized around this spectrum of contribution. Networks like Airbnb, like Wikipedia, depend on a very small percentage of people who are willing to contribute and give back. It's about 1 to 10% of any network. And what we've learned through our work is that these characteristics, this willingness to contribute, applies not just to kids, but to all participants in the network: doctors, nurses, dietitians, parents, there are a subset of people who want to make contribution part of what they do. So here's a picture of Seth several years ago giving a presentation about his experience living with IBD and how he manages his adalimumab dose when he has to travel. In fact, Seth was here in Singapore with Rob last week. Many of the team got to meet him, and he was teaching other kids at an Improve Care Now conference about his experience and the ways in which he could, he had made living with this condition part of his life. I also want to show an example of from another patient named Zach Wall. Zach, when this is a picture of Zach Wall when he was 9 years old. Zach's dad was very interested in nutritional therapy for kids with Crohn's disease in order to try and avoid biologic agents. And for many years in the US, physicians had been reluctant to use this treatment because it involved putting down an NG tube every night and going on an elemental formula in order to quiet down the gut and allow healing to take place. Nutritional therapy is much more widespread in Europe, and Zach and his dad wanted to learn about how to do this procedure, and they wanted to teach other kids. They wanted to do something that would teach other kids and destigmatize this work. So what I want to show you is a video that they made. It's just a 1-minute video.
Hello, everybody, and YouTube. I would like to show you, well, I have Crohn's disease, as you know from my first part, but I've upgraded my tube feed so that I can actually do it myself every single night now. And well, I want to show you. So if you didn't see my first part, go see it or just watch right here. I'll show you how you do most of the stuff. So this is the nasal gastric tube. Am I saying that right? nasal gastric tube and nasal gastric tube. Yeah, now I said it right. So this is the goop that you have to put a lot of it on. What is that goop actually called, Dad? Step 3. Hold the tube near your nose so you get the smell of it, and then you'll get relaxed and you just put it down. For me, I have to go to the second black dot. So now we tape it to my face.
So this is a pretty stunning example of the kinds of contributions that kids can make. And when I watch this video, I always think about several different things. First, who wouldn't want to have a kid like Zach Wall? He's just amazing. The second is, think about how we make educational videos in our medical centers. At our place, it involves signing a bunch of forms, going and raising money to get a videographer to come shoot the video. In this case, Zach and his dad did this on their flip phone. They uploaded it to the Improve Care Now website, and it was available for anybody else who was interested in this tool. The other important impact that this video had was that it engendered quite a bit of empathy among the gastroenterologists and dietitians in the network. If Zach could do this, then maybe the rest of us could do it, and we ought to also figure out what it was like to make that happen. So what grew up in the network was a empathy campaign that is illustrated by this slide that shows the nationwide children's GI group proudly displaying the NG tubes that they learned how to put down to understand what the experience of using this procedure was like every single day. And when I show this slide, I like to emphasize that networks are about inherent motivation. If I, as a leader in a hospital, went to the GI group and said, you guys ought to put NG tubes down to see what your patient's experience is like, our HR department would probably be on the phone with me in about 30 seconds saying you're not allowed to do something like that. But when it grows up from the bottom, it's an entirely different story. And so doctors and nurses all over the network started actually doing this to themselves and some of them wrote about it on the Improve Care Now blog. So this is the kind of thing that's possible, and what I think is a great illustration of the kind of passion and energy that invigorates people who participate as part of a network. Let me just touch a little bit on several of the other dimensions. The second is the use of technology and tools for sharing data. These are the registry from Improve Care Now collects data from all participating care sites, and data like these are available on a daily basis. It's refreshed every single day. This is a graph showing the remission that's available to all participating care sites every day. This is a tabular output of the data. As I mentioned, the data are transparent, and what you can see here are the names of each individual care center. Each care center can look up not only their own performance, but the performance of other care centers. And this is transparent even among hospitals that normally compete, like Cincinnati Children's and Nationwide Children's. So you can look up performance on any given metric, and you can filter the data according to which sites you want to look at. And then finally, the data are available for the management of for care centers population. There are population management reports, but there are also individual care planning reports that are available for individual patients. So care centers can get a report like this that shows in the upper left, the labs that the patient's has had, the results of a global assessment score. At the bottom right are the disease activity score plotted over time, so an individual physician can see that in this case the patient was getting better plateaued and is now getting worse. So we call this a triple use registry. The data are used for clinical care, they're used for improvement, and they're also used for research, which I'll share now. So we use the data to guide the quality improvement cycles, but we also use the data to conduct clinical trials. Mike Kappelman, who's a gastroenterologist at the University of North Carolina, led this trial focused on the comparative effectiveness of dual so-called combination therapy, the use of a biologic with an immunomodulator like methotrexate versus monotherapy for patients with pediatric Crohn's disease. This was a top priority of gastroenterologists and parents in the network, whether or not these two drugs needed to be used together. It was the largest trial ever done in pediatric gastroenterology, and it had a very interesting result. First, let me just say the clinical question that was raised beginning in 2014 was around the use of anti-TNF or biologic agents for kids with Crohn's disease. They don't work for every patient. The other issue is that they don't work forever. So maintaining response is very important. And the question was whether or not combination therapy with an immunosuppressant could improve the response rate and prolong the duration of response with an acceptable level of side effects. And these are the results. It was very interesting. On the left are the data about infliximab. The blue line is the intervention group. These are patients who received combination therapy. The red line is the patients who received monotherapy. And what you can see is that for patients on infliximab, there was no difference in the survival curve for patients treated with or without combination therapy. But for patients on adalimumab, Humira, there was a significant difference. Patients who were on combination therapy were much more likely to stay in prolonged remission than patients who weren't. These results were just published last March. We're currently starting a large dissemination and implementation campaign using implementation science methods in the network, funded by a new $3 million trial by the Helmsley Foundation. So we're excited about the results, and we're excited about the opportunity to put the results into practice very quickly. So what I hope I've illustrated here is the concept of a learning health system. This is the definition of a learning health system from the National Academy of Medicine. It's a system in which science, informatics, incentives, and cultures are aligned for continuous improvement and innovation, with best practices embedded in the delivery process and new knowledge captured as an integral byproduct of the delivery experience. We think that the network model is a way of implementing learning health systems at scale. They, as I said, have these four key characteristics: an unrelenting focus on outcomes that really matter. If you've got IBD, that means staying in remission and living the life you want to live. Shared real-time transparent data, active participation by the community, and the use of methods to change the system and build improvement capability. So I illustrate these again here: the unrelenting focus on outcomes, an engaged community with the values and capabilities of participating, shared infrastructure of technology and policies and processes and incentives, and a rapid learning system. These are the scientific methods and data that we use to support rapid real-world learning and evidence generation. Our motto is that these learning health networks connect the science of modern medicine with the wisdom and care of a community. So I hope that's been helpful, and we'll look forward to taking some questions and comments, and perhaps and also thank Rob for not only coming on this trip, not only doing tremendous work, using many of these same methods in the community, but also being kind enough to allow me to share his own personal story and Seth's story.
Thank you, Peter, for that amazing sharing. And it was so insightful about how you harness the voice of the patient, the patient of the community in this co-production process. Now, because of time, I'm going to select some questions that have come up into the chat group. Now, because Robert has just joined us in the Q&A, maybe I'll get the first question to Robert. Now, quite a lot of questions were around ensuring equity and inclusion of stakeholders, in the engagement process. So how do we engage very quiet members of the community, especially the underprivileged, the underserved, to surface the needs and concerns to health teams?
So thanks, and thanks, Peter, for that great representation of the work. So I'll just acknowledge, while Peter was beginning to move the Crohn's disease network, where families were really motivated by a chronic condition, and folks like me who were very comfortable in the healthcare system were speaking up, he was actively helping us think about moving this into community-related outcomes, right? The key drivers of asthma, early mental health, early reading, are not about just changing what doctors and nurses are doing, but changing a community system. And I think we're too early to say, well, here's the proven path to equitably and sustainably and affordably involve community members. But I think among the key shifts we did were two things. One is we just got started before we were ready. We created safe spaces, trauma-informed spaces in which the most ready stakeholders with power got in the room with community members from some of our lowest income or most marginalized neighborhoods. And we may have had some previous relationships. Maybe it was a mom who had been in a mom's parenting group, or a nurse home visitor said, this mom really has a lot to say and contribute. Can we invite her in? But if we didn't spend 2 years planning, we really just tried to create some initial small groups to inspire us and hear that early wisdom and make, expand the group of believers. So that's number one. I think number two was we made an early hire onto our team, right? We got some community foundation money, again, not to launch a huge program, but to hire a woman from the community who had led moms groups for kids, parents of young children 0 to 3. So she was highly respected in some of our toughest neighborhoods. Everyone knew her as Miss Anita. And again, taking that next step of walking through how does a health system make a hire like that, sustain a hire, help her on her career path, and then essentially a snowball technique from there. I currently now have 4 or 5 folks who are very comfortable in community, lived in many of the communities of Cincinnati, have established powerful networks, and can be out there in a sustained way to be seen as trustworthy rather than Rob shows up once a week. Last thing I'll just say is among the greatest compliments I've ever had as a pediatrician was a community organizer who said, Rob, you are the most way out there pediatrician I've ever met, right? Which in some sense was sad because I wasn't out there that much, but she had seen me at a consistent series of events in the community. And again, it's shifting what the big tall towers of, that create shadows in their community that we're getting out of our offices and spending meaningful time at community events.
Yeah, thank you, Robin. I think what you said is very meaningful because patients are looking out for somebody who is credible, but at the same time, who is able to provide that bridge to people whom they think have hierarchical powers over them and to speak up for them. So that trust and building that trust is probably very important, and you need to show up a lot on the ground. Yes. Okay, now, my next question now would be for Peter. I have this personal saying my own personal saying is, we cannot sail the oceans if everybody wants to stay on the shore, right? What are some of your challenges in doing this data sharing and setting up this learning health system? And why are some organizations resistive to such initiatives? Do you have that experience where organizations could be resistive? Or in the data sharing process? So a lot of the questions in the chat group are, who owns the data? Are people willing to share the data? Are people willing to be part of this learning health network?
Yeah, so this picks up on what Rob was saying and the comments that he was making about what attracts people to this work, what makes us credible when we say that we want to go to work in this way, because we are people who work in the big ivory towers, and oftentimes we're tarnished by our big ideas, but our inability to get things into practice. What I think is at the crux of getting cooperation and building trust is a genuine commitment, as Rob said, to focus on outcomes that truly matter most to patients and families. So that's not, as physicians, we might be interested in an asthma score or whether a kid got all of her vaccinations, but that's not necessarily what, or if we might be interested in a hemoglobin A1C for our patients with diabetes. But if you ask somebody who's living with diabetes what they care about being able to do the things that they want to do, to be able to go to church on the weekends or to run in a track race or to spend time with grandchildren. And so it's being open to have the conversations about what truly matters together with the participants, all the participants who have a stake in the outcome. And the second thing is to be going after very aspirational goals. This is not about incremental change. This is about building new systems. And in order to build a new system, we have to be able to imagine an idealized future, even if we can't get there today. And that takes building that kind of credibility and building that kind of willingness, as you said, to get off the shore requires us to both hold the aspiration and also be pragmatic about what we can do today. And so a lot of the upfront work that Rob does, that we do in other networks, is about opening up those conversations to allow that to happen. I don't know.
Can I have one
please.
quick sentence there, which is for the community work, often as you start to move past healthcare data, the resistance can be even higher. People worry about privacy. I think one of the keys is to recognize a lawyer's job is to mitigate risk, and that our job may be to demonstrate the risk of not taking these chances, of not leaving the shore. And often that's not so clear. There may be a story or an anecdote of a bad outcome out there, but part of our job has been to be a little clearer about what happens when we don't cooperate.
Yeah. I think that is very real, and I think it really needs people to overcome the inertia. And I believe that maybe the community participants can speak loudly for the need for such data sharing, and then we have to do the other bits of the legal aspects of it. Now, because of time, I'm just going to pick one or two more last questions. Robert, tell us, over the past few days that we've been spending time with you, you have also mentioned about broken systems, right? Mm-hmm. How do we work together to ensure that systems do not become broken?
Yeah, I know less about a priori design, but certainly nudging a system into place, I actually think has to start with some of the central system users in the room. So to me, that's families and youth. I can see elements of the outpatient clinical care system and a bit of the inpatient clinical. A teacher can see the classroom and sort of start and end of the day. I think one of the key elements is to hear from a family about the journey of their child, whether that's towards their school success or the control of their asthma or their ADHD. And so that's number one, is have somebody who truly has a systems view and realizes and can convey to us how when I optimize healthcare, I'm sub-optimizing for the patient, right? If I don't want to be open on a Saturday or a Sunday, what does that mean for the parents who hold 2 or 3 or 4 jobs combined? So one is the voice in the room. I think the second is actually some of these rigorous methods that Peter shared that we learned from industry. We didn't come up with the model for improvement or those 3 questions. What are we trying to achieve? How will we know it changes in improvement? What are we going to try? Those 3 questions, when multiple sectors in the system start to learn that, public health, education, healthcare, we may differ in our subject matter expertise, but we share a how of improving those system processes. So that I joke, to go from my exam room to a quality preschool across the street can take 43 broken steps, especially for an immigrant family who doesn't have English as their first language. But together with our preschool partners now, we know how to cut those steps in half and make the remaining ones work much better.
Thank you, Robert. I think that is wisdom indeed. And many times we know about broken systems or a system that's not even linked in the first place. I think Yeah, so it's not really broken, but it's not linked. Now, we need to make a hard stop now because Professor Peter and Professor Robert have to get on to their next activity. So I would just like to close by thanking our speakers and our participants this morning. And I would like to just summarize that in order for us to learn together and set up this learning health networks, we really need to be adaptive, bold, collective, and collaborative. Yeah, so with that, as parting remarks, I would like to say thank you for all your participation. Now, for clinicians in the audience, we're going to flash up a QR code now for you to actually get your CME points. We have also deposited a link in the chat for you to click on the link for your CME points. So please proceed to do what you do necessary. And the next slide shows a QR code for the nurses who are participants in the audience. You can also scan the QR code for your CME participation points. So with that, I would like to ask if participants could give us a feedback on the survey if you receive a survey link. And thank you all for your time this morning for this rich sharing. And I will see all of you at the next child webinar. Thank you very much.
Look in your eyes, and I can see a life together. Standing by you, and I think I want to forever. And after all has come and gone through all the years, I can't believe the moment's fine.